Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before we get started, make sure to check out the Merida Magic YouTube channel for more content like this, and don't forget to like and share and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so let's dive in.
Sounds good.
Imagine waking up one morning and everything you buy is suddenly 25% more expensive.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'd be rough.
Your coffee, your car.
Oof.
Yeah. That's the kind of impact a tariff war could have, and that's what we're looking at today.
Right.
We're talking about the U.S. and Mexico and President Trump's threat to put a 25% tariff on all Mexican imports.
Huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to look at how Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum is handling this.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's been remarkably calm and strategic about it.
I've heard that. Yeah.
And we've got a great article from El País that gives us a really good perspective on this.
Okay.
So today we're going to unpack what's driving this whole tariff situation, what it means for both countries, and how President Sheinbaum is navigating this complex challenge.
It's interesting because President Trump's threat isn't just about the economics of it. It's tied in with things like migration and drug trafficking.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated challenge that needs a really careful response.
Right. It's like he's trying to hit multiple targets with this one big policy lever.
Yeah.
And that's why I think President Sheinbaum's approach is so interesting.
Sure.
She's quoted in the El País article saying, "We have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. We're going to wait."
Wow.
That sounds like a leader who's in control.
Absolutely. Her statement says a lot about her leadership.
Yeah.
It's a message of preparedness and composure.
Right.
Even though there's a potential economic storm brewing.
Yeah.
Instead of like a knee-jerk reaction,
Right.
she's signaling a strategic kind of wait-and-see approach,
Right.
which in a situation like this can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like she's playing chess,
Uh-huh.
carefully considering all of her moves.
Right.
But what does plan A, B, and C actually mean? What actions could Mexico take to reduce the impact of these tariffs?
Well, one key area they could focus on is diversifying their trade.
Okay.
They've already been working on building trade relationships with countries in Europe and Asia.
Smart.
Yeah,
Right.
reducing their reliance on the U.S. market.
Makes sense.
This could involve using existing agreements they have with the European Union
Uh-huh.
and also exploring new partnerships in those really fast-growing Asian economies.
That's a great move. Spreading the risk.
Exactly.
Not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yep.
But what about the impact on American consumers? Aren't tariffs ultimately paid by the people buying the goods?
That's right. A 25% tariff on Mexican imports could mean American consumers end up paying a lot more.
Yeah.
Think about everyday things. Cars, electronics produce even your morning coffee.
Wow.
All of those could become much more expensive.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about economics here.
Right.
This is about real people feeling the impact in their wallets.
Ouch. So while President Trump might see this as a way to pressure Mexico, it seems like it'll be American consumers who end up shouldering a lot of the burden.
It seemed that way.
The El País article says it could cost U.S. consumers over $10 billion.
Wow.
That's a massive amount.
It really is, and it highlights how interconnected our economies are.
First,
Tariffs aren't just about punishing one country.
right.
They create ripple effects that can impact everyone.
Yeah.
In this case, American businesses and consumers could end up paying a hefty price.
It's complex for sure.
Yeah.
It's not just about trade figures.
Right.
It's about people's lives and jobs and the economies of both countries.
Absolutely.
So let's look more closely at what's behind this tariff threat.
Okay.
What are the issues that are causing this tension?
On the surface, it seems to be about trade imbalances.
Okay.
President Trump has consistently been critical of the trade deficit between the U.S. and Mexico.
Yeah.
He argues that it's unfair to American businesses and workers.
That makes sense, but I feel like there's more to it than just the trade figures.
You're right. The issues of migration and drug trafficking are very much a part of this tariff threat.
Okay.
President Trump has repeatedly said that Mexico isn't doing enough to stop the flow of migrants and drugs across the border.
Uh-huh.
And he seems to be using tariffs as a way to force their hand.
So it's a multi-layered issue with deep roots.
Definitely.
And in this complex landscape, President Sheinbaum's response is what stands out.
I agree.
Her composure and strategic approach, especially her saying she has multiple plans in place.
Right.
It paints a picture of a leader who's not just reacting, but anticipating and preparing.
Exactly. Her approach is different from the more reactive stances we've seen before.
Yeah.
It suggests a level of strategic thinking and foresight
All right.
that could be really important in navigating this challenging situation.
Like she's saying, we're ready for whatever comes our way.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to those interesting plan A, B, and C.
Right.
What do you think those plans might include?
Well, besides diversifying their trade, another element could be strengthening the domestic market.
Yeah.
If Mexican goods become more expensive in the U.S.,
Uh-huh.
the government might focus on boosting domestic consumption to make up for potential losses.
Interesting. Turning a challenge into an opportunity to be more self-reliant.
Exactly. And of course, there's always the option of retaliatory tariffs.
Right.
If the U.S. imposes tariffs on Mexican goods, Mexico could respond by doing the same.
Makes sense.
However, this could lead to a back-and-forth escalation that ultimately harms both economies.
It's a risky game.
Yeah,
And it shows how tariffs are often used as a tool in political negotiations.
definitely.
It's not just about economics.
Right.
It's about power dynamics and political strategy.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to look beyond the headlines
Yeah.
and understand what's really driving these trade disputes.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. There's
Yeah.
always more to the story.
For-
One thing's for sure, though. President Sheinbaum's response is a fascinating example of leadership and strategic thinking.
I agree. Her calm demeanor, her emphasis on being prepared, and her focus on long-term solutions are all valuable lessons,
Yeah.
not just for people in power,
Right.
but for all of us dealing with the complexities of a globalized world.
Absolutely.
It's also important to consider the impact on American industries and jobs.
Yeah.
The U.S. and Mexico have really interconnected supply chains,
Uh-huh.
and disrupting that with tariffs could have some unintended consequences.
That's a really good point. It's easy to just focus on the big economic picture.
Right.
But these decisions affect real people and businesses on both sides of the border.
Absolutely. Take the auto industry, for example.
Okay.
Many American car manufacturers rely on parts and labor from Mexico.
Right.
If tariffs make production more expensive, it could lead to job losses in the U.S.,
I see.
even if it encourages some companies to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. in the long run.
It's like a delicate ecosystem.
Yep.
Every action has a reaction, and sometimes in unexpected places.
Exactly.
It shows how important it is to really think things through
Uh-huh.
and have a thoughtful discussion before doing something so drastic.
I completely agree. And this brings us back to President Sheinbaum's emphasis on dialogue.
Yeah.
Her willingness to wait and see rather than immediately retaliating
Right.
creates an opportunity for negotiation and compromise.
It's a refreshing approach.
Yeah.
Especially with the way politics are these days, where
Yeah.
everything feels so confrontational.
Yes. It reminds us that even when we disagree, keeping those lines of communication open is really important.
For sure.
It allows us to find solutions that benefit everyone.
Right.
Solutions that we might not have seen at first.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Speaking of solutions, we've talked about Mexico diversifying their trade and strengthening their domestic market.
Right.
But what about the U.S.? What are some things they could do?
Well, one option is to take another look at the existing trade agreements
Okay.
and see if there are ways to modernize them.
Interesting.
Maybe there are ways to address President Trump's concerns about the trade imbalances
Yeah.
without having to resort to tariffs.
That sounds like a much more collaborative approach.
Yeah.
Trying to find solutions through negotiation and compromise.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that a healthy trade relationship is good for both countries.
Uh-huh.
Finding ways to make that relationship more fair and beneficial for everyone would be ideal.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly.
If both economies are doing well, everyone benefits.
Precisely. Another thing the U.S. could do is focus on the root causes of the tension.
Okay.
Things like migration and drug trafficking.
Yeah.
Working together with Mexico to find solutions to these shared challenges
Right.
could be more effective than using tariffs as a way to force action.
It's about taking a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
Understanding how these issues are connected.
Right.
And finding solutions that get to the root of the problem.
Exactly. It requires a deeper level of engagement and a willingness to see things from different perspectives.
I agree.
But ultimately, it could lead to more sustainable outcomes that benefit everyone.
This whole situation really shows how important leadership is.
Absolutely. The decisions leaders make can have a huge impact.
Yeah.
And in President Sheinbaum's case, we're seeing a leadership style that prioritizes calm, strategic thinking and open communication.
Right.
It's a great lesson for anyone in a position of authority,
Yeah.
especially during times of uncertainty and challenge.
It's like she's showing us a different way to deal with conflict.
Yeah.
One that focuses on composure and thoughtful engagement
Exactly.
rather than reacting with aggression.
And that's a powerful message.
Well, sure.
Not just for this trade dispute,
Right.
but for how we deal with any challenge we face.
It's about taking a step back, breathing,
Yeah.
and considering all sides before taking action. It's about trying to understand rather than just trying to get our own way.
And it's about recognizing that in our complex, interconnected world, collaboration and dialogue are usually the most effective ways to find lasting solutions.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
what are some key things you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important takeaway is that tariffs are complicated.
Yeah.
And they have far-reaching effects. It's not as simple as just winners and losers.
Right. It's about understanding how our economies are connected.
Yeah.
And how policy decisions can create a ripple effect.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to highlight the power of leadership.
I agree.
President Sheinbaum's response shows us that staying calm, thinking strategically, and being open to dialogue can be incredibly effective.
For sure.
Even when things are difficult.
It's a reminder that we can all be leaders.
Yeah.
Whether it's in our personal lives, our communities, or on a global scale. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is pause, reflect, and choose a path of thoughtful engagement. It's been really interesting looking at all of this.
Yeah.
And it definitely gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
What do you think, listener? What's the best way forward for the U.S. and Mexico?
Yeah, good question.
Is it about making a new trade deal or finding some agreement on immigration or maybe something else entirely?
Right?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and remember, it's so important to stay informed.
Absolutely.
The more we understand about these complicated issues, the better we can be part of the conversation and advocate for policies that create a fairer world.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, and sometimes just taking the time to really dig into these topics can be a powerful thing in itself.
For sure.
And hell, speaking of diving deep, don't forget to check out the Merida Magic YouTube channel for more content like this.
Yeah, go check it out.
Like, share, and subscribe to keep those insights coming.
We've talked about a lot today.
Yeah, we have.
But I think the main takeaway is that trade, especially in today's world, it's not just about numbers and figures.
Right.
It's about people and relationships and finding ways to work together so everyone benefits.
So true, President Sheinbaum's response to this whole tariff thing really highlights that.
Yeah,
Her
definitely.
focus on talking things through and finding solutions instead of just reacting emotionally.
Right.
It's something we can all learn from.
It is. It's a reminder that even when things are tough,
Yeah.
we can still choose to engage thoughtfully and look for common ground.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into tariffs, trade, and all things international relations.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.